Plain and simple, should esports be considered an actual sport? My answer would be no. I think esports are a challenge. I think esports are competition, but I don't think esports are actual sports. Now, when you hear that, you might think that I'm against esports or against video games. And of course, you would be wrong. I mean, if you're listening to this, I would have to say that I am hosting, if that's what you want to say, or just making whatever, a video game podcast. I've been playing video games since single digits and I'm pushing 40 and I have not stopped. I enjoy video games a lot. I'm an avid player, I'm a supporter. The only reason I'm saying this is not to defend myself. I'm just really trying to drill it in your head that I'm pro video games. And yet, I still believe that esports isn't an actual sport. Now, you're not going to see me campaigning against esports. I'm not going to be out there with a picket sign going like this is not a real sport. Don't classify it under such, you know. I'm not writing to like the powers that be, whatever body governs esports, and asking them to not make this a legitimate sport. If that's the way things turn out, and I believe that's the way they are, because I don't, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's an active person or agency or of some sort trying to actually stop esports from being classified as an actual sport. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm not actively against it. If that's what they want to be called, if esports wants to be classified under a real sport, then so be it. You know, that's the way it is. But like that's the way, because I'm thinking of sports in a traditional sense, right? For example, like I like combat sports. You know, I'm not a big fan of like traditional sports. At least that's what I call them. And by traditional sports, I mean like baseball, football, soccer. Um, I'm hockey, tennis. I like combat sports. I like MMA. I like boxing. I like jujitsu. I like any sort wrestling, kickboxing, Muay Thai. I watch all of this, you know, from one championship to Bellator to UFC to PFL. I'm always on the hunt and for something new to watch, you know, and luckily, you know, even bare knuckle fighting I watch, and I'm not the greatest fan of bare knuckle fighting because I just feel like I like the fighting competition aspect of it, but the fact that these fighters really get hurt, man, their faces get lacerated, and you know, it's not so much that it's gruesome. I can handle the gruesome. I feel like there's no longevity in that sport because you're just you're breaking your hands, you're breaking your fingers. It's it's surprisingly like it's surprising to me how delicate your fingers and your fists, your hands can be. There's a lot of small bones in there, and they can break easily, and they're like delicate weapons. That's the best way I can describe them. But anyways, point being that when I think of sports, I think of sports in the traditional sense, right? And let's get literal here, right? If you look at the definition of sports, it'll say that it involves physicality, right? And that is mostly missing from esports, and that's the only reason why I don't classify it as an actual sport. I've said this before in some of my videos, like um, I feel like it should be classified under something else, like it should be like e-challenge or e-comp. You know, I think that kind of has a nice ring to it, like short for competition, obviously, but like e-comp. That sounds cool to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, if we're looking at it through a traditional sense, which is the way I am, I guess that's the number one way you should be looking at things, right? What are things traditionally? Now, I don't know if I'm going to be thinking like this in the future, 10 years down the line. And the reason I say that is because things turn things tend to get more malleable as time goes on. And this isn't just with sports, right? This is also happening with gender now. And without getting too much into it, you know, at one point, gender was something that was concrete. It was rock solid. It was man or woman. And of course, there was always some gray area, right? Um, but I feel like that's more malleable now. Now, gender is like, you know, you can pretty much claim some oftentimes really outrageous shit. And then sometimes you'll hear some sensible stories from people who believe that gender isn't as fixated as we think it is. So I believe sports is taking that same trajectory, right? It's taking that same route, right? Sports is traditionally it's something that involves a high degree of physicality, and of course, psychologically, you have to have reflexes, and you have to have some psychological aspects to it also, right? Reflexes, uh, you know, I guess forward thinking, problem solving on your feet. That's the main reason, one of the main reasons I like combat sports, because it's human chess. It's like you have to think on your feet literally in order for you to, you know, beat your opponent. So I don't know how I'm going to feel 10 years from now, because the definitions of things are becoming very malleable. Things that were once fixated in concrete were they're very fluid now. And, you know, I feel like maybe this is a weird take on things, but I feel like us as a human race, regardless of what country you're in this part of the or what part of the world, I feel like us humans has just been gravitating towards things that are more cerebral than physical, more psychological than physical. And I'm no fucking economist or no biologist, or I don't really study trends. It's just this is all, what's the word? Anecdotal. I think that's the word. This is all just what I think basically. I think that people are just they're more psychological now, right? Like we say it all the time, right? When I was a kid, there was no internet. I live in this weird time where like half of my life I have the internet and then the other half I didn't. So it's almost like I'd be like, hey, I can remember when we had not dial-up phones, those rotary phones that you had to like fucking stick your finger inside of this little, you know, s- this little circle trap, and you just push the dialer or whatever, the little ring, and it takes forever to make a goddamn call. That's what I'm trying to say. So I come from that time too. So I'm in a weird position here. But when I was younger, we were oftentimes forced to go outside. And you know what? Not even forced. That's not even the word I meant to use. Like we loved going outside, right? Like I saw a meme the other day where it was like this is how you can tell, everybody's hanging out at, Billy's house or whoever the neighborhood friend is, right? You would go outside before you enter Billy's house, you would see like six bicycles outside of the like the step area, and or on the lawn, or on the street, on the concrete, wherever you may have lived at. I lived in the city, so it was like, out in front of the house. Or most of the time we try to get the bikes in because obviously there were thieves about. But that's how you knew one of your friends was at another friend's house, because you would see a bunch of fucking bicycles just piled up. And it's like you don't really see that nowadays. Kids are, at least from my experience, kids are more in the house playing, video games, or, watching YouTube, or being content creators, like it seems like kids all the things that kids want to do now involve less and less physicality and more things that require you to be more psychologically active, mentally stimulating things. And I do feel like that's why I said like 10 years from now, the definition of sport will probably be rewritten the same way the definition of gender will probably be rewritten. And um, I'm not, it's as a human, right? Like it's hard to abandon an idea that you've carried on for in your heart or in your mind for so many years, and then replace it with a new one, right? I guess you would call that being a progressive, or just that sounds kind of political, but just being a progressive person, right? Like a person that's just like, hey, I'm not married to my ideas. If I find an idea that's better, I'll just take that idea and just put it in my head and just replace the old outdated idea. I'm That's the way I am, or at least that's the way I try to be. So that's why, like, you know, it- we're also very tribal creatures, right? So if someone was to hear me right now say, "Hey, I don't think esports is an actual sport," I can feel the troops mobilizing outside of my door with pitchforks ready to, hang me. And it's like I don't mean it as an insult. I don't mean it. I'm pro video games. I just feel like it should be classified under something else. But I think people would take offense to that. Some people would I think they'll miss the entire point. Like, 'cause that's all I'm really trying to say is just, hey, it's not. Why can't it be anything else besides sports? And there's a couple things that happen with sports, right? That I ask myself, like, I don't know, are these things actual sports, right? Because mind you, the main attribute of a sport is physicality, right? Till this day, that's the definition of sports, right? You can look it up yourself. That it's also psychological and it's also, for amusement and for entertainment and for, even to settle some scores, right? Some people say that like football was created as a war simulation, right? Like during peacetime or whatever, like people created football to simulate war, right? I don't know how true is that. That's just something I heard, but for example, we'll start off with like boxing, right? Boxing is has been in decline for quite a long time, and I believe that that's because of what I was saying earlier. I don't know for sure, right? Maybe people just aren't interested in boxing for other reasons, but I very much still like boxing, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that it's not as popular as it once was, right? Now it is getting some sort of a resurgence with, people like Logan Paul and Jake Paul, like, whether you like them or not, they're bringing lifeblood into the sport. Once again, you've got people who are traditionalists who go, "Oh, they're making boxing a mockery. Boxing was once a gentleman's sport, and they're making boxing into some sort of a freak circus act." You know what I mean? And maybe you're right, and then you've got the more progressive thinkers that are just like, hey, man, people are like, doesn't matter. Eyes are on boxing right now. Isn't that what you want? You want the sport to survive because it is a beautiful sport. Of course, it's barbaric also, but that's probably its main appeal, right? I understand that it's not for everyone, but I do remember because I did live in a time, the Mike Tyson days, the Evander Holyfield days, Tito Trinidad days, all of those days, Oscar De La Hoya days. Boxing was, it seemed to me at least, that boxing was way more popular. Like, it used to be a family event. Like, people would sit down, all sorts of walks of life, right from young to old, to different religions. I grew up in a diverse neighborhood, right? And you've had all sorts of races will come over to my house. Or so I had Dominicans, blacks, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, you name it. Like, we all loved boxing, and the craziest part about that is that it used to be a family event. Our fathers would watch, our mothers would watch, our uncles would watch. We always sit down and watch Tyson destroy someone. And it was way more popular. It was a lot more eyes on the sport, at least to my knowledge. And then as time went on, now it's like, you can't, if you say boxing and family, like, hey, we're all gonna gather the family to watch boxing, everyone's kind of gonna look at you different because times have changed, whether for the better or for the worse. And I remember, we'll take boxing as an example, right? So boxing, pure physicality for the most part, right? The vast majority of the sport of boxing involves physicality. Of course, there's a psychological aspect to it too. You got to learn how to, quick reflexes, dodge in time, how to roll with the punches, change your strategies up if they're not working, listening to your corner's advice because they're seeing the fight in a broader view. So it used to be purely physical. Then we moved on to like golf, right? When golf became a sport. I don't know how long golf has been a sport, so I can't really comment on that aspect of it. But I remember someone telling me like, "Hey, golf is an actual sport," and I was like, "Ah," I was like, "Okay, yeah, there's some physicality involved in golf, but it's like kind of, I'm not gonna say minimal. I would say it's moderate, a moderate level of physicality." And I was like, but I didn't think about it as a sport like I did with football, because even though I'm not like a football fan or a baseball fan or a soccer fan, I can't tell you shit about players or anything like that. But I can tell you that those are actual sports if we're going by the traditional definition, right? So even though these are sports that I necessarily don't like or watch, they're sports. I didn't even doubt that. I was like, oh, yeah, there's a high amount of physicality in all those sports I just named. So then we talked about golf, and I was like, I don't know. It's kind of like a moderate level, but you know what? It still gets the pass. It still gets the pass because there is some physicality to it, right? Then we moved on to like NASCAR, when NASCAR became an actual sport. And I was like, okay, I think we're pushing it now, because there's minimal physicality involved and like a lot of psychological and skill, right? Because it's on the outside looking in, you may just look at a car, you may just see a car spinning around in a circle and go like, how fucking hard can that be? But you would be wrong. You would need, you need an a deceptively deep amount of skill to be a NASCAR, professional NASCAR racer. Now, I'm not speaking from experience. I barely know how to drive. Uh, I do have my license, just in case you're wondering. But point is, I'm not the greatest driver. I'm not the worst driver. I would say I'm okay driver. Some of my friends say I'm an old lady when I drive. So, whatever. Point is that even I can see the amount of skill that is required, right? I've said reflexes like 40 times already, but you really need some reflexes when it comes to NASCAR and a ridiculous amount of skill, and there's still some physicality involved, but it's a low amount of physicality. So I still struggle with that one. I'm like, I really don't know how NASCAR is a sport, to be honest with you. And then, now we're moving on to something like esports, where I'm like, okay, now I feel like this one is really not a sport, right? It's entertaining as hell, and I've watched a few of them. I mean, I'm not like a super esports guy, but all in all, I enjoy it and I support it. Whenever I can catch one here and there, like I used to watch, or every now and then I'll catch Evo. It's like, for those who don't know, which I'm doing a video game podcast. All you guys know what Evo is. But for those who don't know, it's like, I believe it's a yearly video game competition where there's only fighting games involved. And I like Guilty Gear, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Super Smash Brothers. There's more games involved, but these are all just straight fighting games, and it's great. I thoroughly enjoyed. I've watched it maybe 2, 3 times throughout the years, and sometimes I miss it, sometimes I don't. And this is, there's a lot of esports teams involved in this, and I always think it's fucking cool. It's cool that you can make a living playing video games, and at once it was just at best, video games were just at best at one point described as a hobby, and at worst described as a waste of time. And now those that think video games are a waste of time are actually opening up their mind a little more and going like, oh wait, maybe there's something good about all of this. I'm always trying to break the stereotype of the average gamer, right? The average gamer, I believe, to someone who's not into the video game world and is just on the outside looking in, they might see like a fat guy munching on Doritos, drinking Monster Energy, in his mom's basement. I think that's the worst way you can look at a video gamer, and maybe I'm being a little too hard, but I think that's the way the average people look at video gamers. Um I don't, obviously, cuz I don't feel like I'm any of that. But and I also think Doritos are delicious, and so is Monster. But I don't eat that or drink that stuff regularly at all, just from time to time. But it's still good when I do have some of that. Point is that I hate the fact that you can. I've said this before, like ad nauseum, that you can watch 6 hours of a show on Netflix and binge, and no one would bat an eye. But if you play 6 hours of video games, it's like, hey, there's something fucking wrong with you. You need to go see a psychiatrist. You need to go get laid. You need some sunshine. Take some vitamin D. Um, I do listen. It's like with weed, right? Like everyone's always touting, those who smoke weed, of course, are always going to tout all of the benefits and completely disregard all of the negatives, right? There are negatives, I'm an avid supporter of weed. I don't smoke it nowhere near as much nowadays as I used to, but every now and then I would say I would call myself a social smoker. If a friend lights one up, I'll take a puff or two, but I don't smoke weed while I'm alone or anything like that anymore. I used to spend $250 a week on that shit. I was like deep. But even as a supporter of weed, I still see some drawbacks. I've had terrible experience on weed before. You know what I mean? I've had edibles where I was freaking the fuck out on an airplane. I've smoked weed to the point where I had panic attacks and I had to go out for a walk. I've smoked weed to the point where I was like just anxious as fuck and literally shaking. Like I've had bad experiences on weed, man. And then I've had fantastic experiences on weed where I was just, doing, things behind closed doors that felt even better than they feel normally. And just playing video games and going out I remember going to Colorado and hiking and just being high and just, fucking taking it all in, like, oh man, we really are just dust in the wind. I was like on that fucking hippie level, but it was great. I've had fantastic moments on it, but like to disregard the negatives just because I'm a fan, I'm doing a disservice to myself and everyone around me. It's very easy to be biased. That's a super average and normal human emotion. But you got to be honest with yourself and others. You have to present the negatives and the positives and then let people make the decision themselves. Don't baby them. You know, I I have a friend. I wouldn't say a friend. I would say a coworker, or at least a former coworker, that was telling me that he he didn't tell me he has a problem with video games, but like I kind of pieced that together as the conversations went on with me and him. Like he would tell me that he spends the majority of his time playing video games. That his girlfriend, he has a girlfriend, which uh, that's a big plus, a major plus. But to be perfectly honest with you, and to keep it real with you, I think he's fucking that up because his girlfriend needs to, like, from what he tells me, yell at him to get him out of the house because he wants to just stay home all day and play video games. And I'm like, okay, this is when it's becoming a problem, right? This is like the dark side of video games. And I can't say it's dark because once again, in my eyes, maybe I'm wrong. I do think that the average person thinks like this. The average person who doesn't play video games looks at the worst of what video games have to offer. And that is what I just described with my coworker, that it can become an addiction to the point where you don't want to do anything else but stay in the house and play video games. You don't want to go outside, get any sunshine, any exercise. You don't even want to go out with your girl regularly because you just want to stay home and play games. And I'm trying to make him see, like, hey man, like, you're in a very privileged position. Like, yeah, your life is not in shambles, but like you definitely need to tighten some things up. But you're fortunate enough to have a girlfriend and a partner who supports you, even though she knows you have some sort of an issue. And he's kind of fucking that up. He's like, dude, you gotta, but he's been trying. To his credit, I remember him telling me that he's been going out to these. I'm not going to be specific because if he ever listens to this, I don't want to put him on blast, but he's gone out to certain places that he never normally would have never gone to if it wasn't for his girlfriend dragging him there. And I'm like, great. I don't care if she fucking grabs you by the ear, old school style, and lifts your ass off your fucking gaming chair and brings you to these places. I'm like, that's good. You need to go out. And then he always comes back with the same story because he's done this several times. His girlfriend has had to drag him several times out of the house, and it's the same story every single time I talk to him when he reports how the day went. Right? It's always awesome. It's always awesome. He's always like, "Oh, I had a great time. I bought a T-shirt. I was in the moment." He's like, "Man, I'm gonna follow them now. I'm gonna go out to their concerts," and I just fucking just flat out said what he did. I was trying to be secretive, but I fucked that up. Also, other things, his girlfriend dragged him to other things, and same story. He comes back and he goes, "Oh, that was fucking awesome. I got to do that some more." And I'm like, "You see, man, it's like you just need a little kick in the ass. You know what I'm saying? Some people just need a little, you know, they need a savage beating." No, that's not what I'm joking. Relax. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying some people just need a little kick in the ass. They need a little motivation. And then once they get going, and I'm guilty of this. I definitely have, I've been that guy before in the past. It's like, oh no, fuck that, fuck that, fuck that. And as soon as I have it, I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I will never stop loving this. You know, it happens, man. That's a human thing, and especially if you're young and you're very cynical like I am, and also anxious and you're depressed. And I was all of that growing up, and I'm still battle with some of that shit now as an adult, man. Um, it can be a problem. Video games can be a problem. You can't sit here and just name all the positives. There anything. A kitchen knife can be used to chop onions, but it can also be used to murder another human. I'm not advocating murder, but you see where I'm going with this, right? Like a tool can be used for something bad, right? Same thing in video games. Video games can be used as a relaxing pastime, right? But it can also be a crippling addiction. I just compared video games to murder. Probably not the same thing, but you know, kind of the same energy, not the same. Whatever. Point is, something can be used Something good can be used to become something bad. If you overuse something good, it can easily turn into something bad. Um, what I got here, I made little notes today. I'm professional now. I've never done that before. Now I'm making little footnotes on a pink sticky pad, and I can't even keep up with that shit. I put slap fighting is not a sport. I guess I was supposed to talk about that when I was, you know, lecturing all of you youngsters on the dangers of esports. And I forgot. But slap fighting is not a fucking sport, man. I just got to say that, for those who don't watch UFC or any type of combat sport, the president is Dana White, and that's his name, and he thinks he's starting this league of it's not once again, I guess it's a sport too, which is weird. That's another one, right? It's just slap fighting. It's just like it's literally just one guy slaps the other, and then the other guy slaps the other until one of them gets knocked out or something like that. And I think that's a horrible idea all across the board. Like people obviously, I really think that maybe I don't know if he got the idea himself or maybe his social media guy was like, dude, there's fucking millions of hits on videos of people getting slapped across the face. We should just get that part. We should just condense that part, or just pick that part and just make it an entire sport. Just the people slapping each other in the face. And I'm just like, what the fuck, man? I'm not supporting any of that. That's nuts. It's hard for me to watch bare knuckle fighting. They're actually fighting. You can dodge, you can weave, you can get out the way. You can't do that shit in slap fighting. It's a free shot. God damn, what's his name? It was a commentator or a fighter, a former fighter turned commentator. I believe his name is Dan Hardy. Probably fucked that up. But he said something beautiful about it. One of the things he said is just like it's a free shot. It's like basically a gateway to concussion. You're just giving people concussions and CTE for free. Like at least you can dodge in an actual fight, even if it is bare knuckle fighting, right? You can move, you can get out the way, you can at least try. You can't do that in slap fighting. It's you have to get hit. You're 100% gonna get hit. Like, you know what I mean? It's weird, man. I I'm interested to see what's gonna happen with esports, because that's what it's classified under now. And I remember reading a Wikipedia page, and I understand I read Wikipedia a lot, but listen to me, man. I'm very well aware that just like sadly many things that aren't supposed to be, it can be very politicized, right? There's a lot of people, and if I'm not mistaken, people write Wikipedia articles, and you don't even really need to be qualified. If I'm not mistaken, I think anyone can. But for the most part, Wikipedia has not failed me. I would say like maybe 80% of the time, Wikipedia is very accurate. And of course, there's times where I'm reading an article and I'm like, okay, this is way too biased. You can tell the person who's writing this, excuse me, has some sort of an agenda or is aligned with some sort of political party, so they're reflecting those views onto what's on something that's supposed to be unbiased, right? Like if you're reporting on someone, even journalism now is extremely biased, which is fucking weird to me, right? Like that's you're not supposed to be biased. You're just supposed to present the truth as how it is, and then let people decipher what their opinions on it. You just don't tell them what things are. You don't impose your ideas and your beliefs on people. You kind of just, hey, this is what it is. What do you think? But that's not the case nowadays. Not only with journalism, but like with Wikipedia articles and stuff like that. But anyways, I'm very well aware when I'm reading Wikipedia. But for the most part, it hasn't let me down. And I forgot the segue here, but I do remember that it was saying that esports is controversial because of what I just said, which is, so a lot of people don't consider it to be a sport and a lot do. And I'm not going to fight for this shit. And what I mean by that is like, I'm not going to be out there on the streets going against, hell no. If today the powers that be go, hey, tough luck, guys, esports is an official sport. Deal with it. I'm going to go, okay, cool. I love video games, and I hope that video games continue to thrive. And I feel like this will help video games thrive. So I'm all for it. But big BUT here. if you ask me if it's an actual sport, I'm gonna say no. Only because call me a traditionalist. It's weird because right now I'm I'm literally a um millennial. That's on my age group. That's what I'm classified under. But I'm a millennial saying boomer things. And I'm well aware of that too. Like to some people it may seem like I'm wagging your finger at you and going like, this is not a sport. You kids need to go out there and exercise. I'm not saying you do whatever the hell you want, but just know that everything you do has consequences. If you eat fried chicken every single day and don't work out and just play video games all day, you're gonna have shitty health. That's just the consequence of that. So kids are fucking smart nowadays. They know what's up, they know what's wrong with them, and they know what's not. And I will say this though, I will say that I am happy that there seems to be uh, a more healthier trend. Like food is getting a little more healthier because it's getting scrutinized more. Like when I was growing up, like you just had fucking cereal with sugar. It was just sugar with food dye. That's what you got in a fucking bag. Super unhealthy. Juices were all sugar, red dye and blue dye, whatever dye they used. Now people are more health conscious and kids are more into working out. Kids are more into like deadlifting and going to the gym a lot. And I feel like the motivation is wrong, but at least they're doing it, and that's what I'm happy about. And by motivation, I mean like kids are more concerned with aesthetic purposes. They're more concerned about how they look instead of like what being healthy actually does for you in the long run. It makes you live a good, beautiful life. It makes you psychologically healthy. It makes you physically healthy. But I think kids nowadays are more focused on how they look. They want those gains. The kids want the gains, dog. They want the big muscles. They want fuck, I want that too. I'm not even going to lie to you. And I work out often. I don't go hard or anything. I jog a couple times a week. I'll do some kettlebells a couple times a week. One kettlebell. One kettlebell. That's all I have. 35 pounder. I could barely lift that shit up. Anyways, point is, I'm trying, man. I'm fucking trying. All right, it's not easy. I just want to eat tacos all day, and I've been playing this Everspace 2 lately. I never thought I would like a space shooter. I never really was into the space stuff, but lately I've been playing that, and I've been having a shitload of fun with that, which is weird. I never thought I would, but I'm glad I gave it a chance, and maybe in the future I'll make a video about that instead of just angering people on this podcast. Is there anything else? Let me see. I got the 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean I'm with it. To close this off, I'm when I say I'm with it, I mean like I'm totally with video games just becoming a thing, becoming as acceptable as Netflix, as acceptable as watching a movie. I'm tired of this stigma against it. I'm tired of people thinking video games are a waste of time. Of course they can be a waste of time if you abuse it. Same thing with movies. If you just sit at home all day and just watch movies, you got this gigantic collection or whatever, then, and you're not doing anything that you're supposed to, like my former coworker, if you're just sitting at home all damn day and you're not doing anything else and your girlfriend literally has to drag you out your house and your mom is yelling at you because you're not doing anything with your life, like, if that's happening, then there's a problem. Someone needs to remind you, like, yo, you're straying off the course a little bit, but I got you, brother. I got you. My brother in Christ. I'm with it. Let's see what the future holds for video games. 10 years from now, we'll check in, Lord willing, if I'm alive, and I'll go, hey, remember when I said that video games aren't a sport? They totally are. And then everyone's gonna be like, fuck you, man. We dug up this clip about something you said 10 years ago, and we're going to fucking cancel your mother. I hope that's not the case. Anyways, thanks for listening to me rant. I'll see you guys later.